We're going to talk a bit about professional ethics, and I'm going to go into some definitions and give you some information. And we're going to finish off with a dilemma that I hope you'll enjoy discussing. The reason why I like discussing ethics and values with students when they're entering these types of professional positions is that it feels very natural or something that's very easy to understand on the surface level, but you're going to find yourselves as you go through your student, paraprofessional, and your professional careers that it's very easy when you're in an abstract setting, but when you actually start to get into ethical, murky territory, it's much more complex. And having a good background and understanding is going to help you make good decisions that helps you keep your job, stay in good standing, and stay out of the newspapers. So, some of you are looking and be like, yeah, it's totally understandable. I already knew that. But as you start digging into it, you're going to find that again, it gets more complex. So I'll start with some more definitions so you understand what we're talking about. So when we say ethics, we're talking about that today. Ethics are what we describe as moral principles that govern a person's behavior or a group's behavior, right? And we're going to differentiate again person and group behaviors when we get to personal and professional ethics. And we describe that. When we talk about values, that's a person's beliefs or ideals that are important to them. The values influence a person's behaviors and attitudes, right? Now, organizations can also have values, right? Our institution has values. The graduate school has value statements. Your programs also may have value statements if they've invested some time in order to put those out. And students know, and outside folks know what they're bringing to the table, that we believe in this, this is how we're moving forward, right? Professionalism, then, is the way that you conduct yourself in the workplace, which is influenced by your ethics and your values and the standards of your workplace. Ethical behavior is acting responsibly in difficult or complex situations with quality, character, and sound judgment. Pretty good? Pretty simple? On the surface, yes, these are all very easy things for us to do, right? However, how many times have you seen a news story come across where a situation where an administrator has made a very unethical decision? You're like, I would never do that. There's a person in a very high position that has made that choice, right? Recently, and I can't remember the institution where this happened, a chancellor plagiarized a commencement speech. This is the chancellor of an institution plagiarizing. This person has a PhD, right? We would sit back and say, we would never do that, right? But we may find ourselves in situations where if we're not being careful about our ethical reasoning, thinking things through in a situation, either for issues of convenience or clarity, we may make a less ethical choice. And so it's important for us to interrogate and investigate this. What also is really important to keep in mind, what makes this more complex and murky, is there is a difference between your personal ethics and professional ethics. And these can sometimes be in conflict. And this is where sometimes decisions can be made that will put you at odds with your workplace, your employer. And so we need to we have some definitions set, we have to have some strategies on how we go about that, right? So your personal ethics include your personal values and your moral qualities. Those are unique to you based on your life experiences, your belief systems, how you were raised, the people you interact with on a daily basis. They're going to inform the decisions that you make, right? But from a professional side, those professional ethics are going to be rules imposed on an employee or in a company or a member of a department, right? They are separated from your personal ethics, which may be different. Your personal ethics are incorporated by your family and friends and your surroundings since your childhood. Examples can be honesty, care, sincerity. We hope that a professional organization will have similar values, but that may not be the case. They may be something that's not conforming to your personal values may harm or hurt others. And your persons are satisfied by following your personal ethics. Transition to the professional side, there are things that you learn as part of a professional setting where you're trained and educated and working there, right? Your onboarding session should give you some idea what the values of the organization are, what the ethical standards are, what the practices of the lab are to make sure that you are meeting ethical practices. Examples might be stating that there's no gossiping in this lab, right? That may be handled through conversations and some team building scenarios to make better relationships so that we don't create that kind of toxic environment where gossiping is, right? That may be an ethic there. Time management may be something that is required. Punctuality, confidentiality, transparency, right? And those may be different for different areas. As you transition from one lab or one position to a different program, a different lab, punctuality may mean something very different, right? Some labs may be, yep, we understand that if you might be 5 minutes late, we know things happen. And another supervisor may say, yes, on time is late, 5 minutes early is on time. And if you're not in this lab by 7:55, that's a problem. We're gonna have a conversation about that, right? But in your personal setting, you may see time as a bit more fluid, right? Recognizing yourself as a whole person, that traffic exists, have kids, right? Things may happen, right? So there might be that clash between personal and professional ethics. Not adhering to your professional ethics may harm your professional reputation versus your personal ethics may harm for others around you. And again, your professional ethics are need to be satisfied to follow. Your professional needs are satisfied by following the professional ethics. Sorry, I'm having trouble moving between these two things today. So there's a strong difference here, right? And it's really important as you are working as paraprofessionals and future professionals that you always take time to evaluate how your personal ethics are lining up with the professional ethics of any organization you are a part of. And if they start getting too far apart, you're going to have some tough decisions to make. Because if you are struggling and feeling dissatisfied because your personal ethics are not exemplified by the organization you're part of, and you start making decisions based on your personal ethics versus your professional ethics, you open yourself up to job action, right? You could be fired, put on probation, have other issues that occur because you are following your personal versus the professional ethics of the organization. That's a problem. That impacts not only your financial stability, but your professional reputation. If you get fired from a job because you disagreed with the decision that was made and you didn't follow it, then it's gonna be harder to get that next job. So what I tell students is if you're having these moments where your personal and professional ethics are not lining up, you have to make a decision on how long you can remain in that position before it becomes untenable and you need to find a new position. And that's okay. It's okay to, if you feel like you can't change an organization, you can't function in that environment, to move to a different environment. Does that make sense? Now, again, this seems very simple on the surface level. Of course, yeah, I would be able to do that. And I can't imagine an organization having beliefs so radically different than mine that it couldn't function in that environment. But if you think about hot button political subjects, it's easy to see where one company may not support your viewpoint that you hold very closely, and it may be very difficult to work there. You also might find situations where the political environment changes a law and you expect your organization to move in one direction in their response to that, and they move in the opposite direction. What do? You have to make some decisions on whether or not you can reconcile your personal and professional ethics in that moment, how important that is to you, or if you need to make a change. And again, I say to students that making a change is not the worst thing in the world. Right? Because if you have that big divergence from your personal and professional ethics, your job satisfaction is going to go down significantly. Your performance will go down significantly. You'll be very dissatisfied. And you spend way too much time at work as a grad student or as a professional to be incredibly dissatisfied or feel disenfranchised by the place you work at. Sound good? Okay. Now moving from the definitions and helping understand personal and professional ethics, we're actually going to talk about the framework of making an ethical decision. Okay. So when you're confronted with a complex, difficult situation that you need to kind of move through and make a good decision, again, murky territory, not cut and dried. Yep, don't plagiarize. With these difficult situations, you ask yourself a couple of questions. Again, they're pretty easily identifiable, but they need to be interrogated. So really ask yourself first when you're presented with this ethical conundrum, is this legal or permissible, right? Both legal standings and then procedures. Am I allowed to do this? Will I be violating university policy or civil law if I engage in that behavior, right? A student attends your office hours and has been very engaged in your lecture, and they bombed a test, and they're asking if they can retake it. Is it ethically defensible? Is there a policy or procedure that allows them to retake the test, or is there none, right? Regardless of how much that student may be your favorite. Now, if there's a policy, you can move forward with that. If there is not, again, you're in ethical territory of how you manage that. You have to ask the question of, is it equitable? Is it fair to all involved in the short term and the long term? Is it considered a win-win in that equity conversation, right? The student who is looking to retake the test, who's heavily involved, are they getting an unequitable opportunity if they retake the test versus a student that has not attended your office hours, has not been as engaged, but also has failed that test and would benefit from retaking it, right? And then you have to think about how will you feel personally about that decision if you make it. How would you feel if it was on the front page of a newspaper, which we don't put much anymore? So I guess on the front page of your Google feed of news stories. And how do you feel if your family or supervisor knew that decision, right? This is the gut check moment, right? The procedure in the civil law, like, yep, I know it, I know this. If I don't know what the procedure is, I can look it up. That's a concrete, this or that, a lot of times, decision. Right? Is it equitable? A little bit more philosophical, but usually have a pretty straightforward answer. This is your gut check. How will I feel, right? If I'm going to feel bad about that decision, that's an indicator it's probably not the ethical decision to make, right? If it's going to keep me up at night. If I wouldn't be happy if my mom knew about it. Very easy framework that you can run an ethical decision through, right? If I am the chancellor and I am writing a commencement speech and I am behind on all of my tasks, is it legal or permissible for me to plagiarize? And the ethical standards of my organization would say, no, it's not okay to plagiarize. Is it equitable? I am not actually giving a fair case to the people who worked so hard to get that degree to come in there and sit and hear this speech. I owe them that time. That's not acceptable. Would I be happy if it was on the front page of Inside Higher Education? No, I would not, because then I'd be forced to apologize publicly. I think he actually also lost his job. So it didn't pass any of the smell tests there, but the decision was made anyway, right? So you have to ask, was this process followed? We don't know. But I encourage you to follow this process when you have these murky situations that you will encounter. So a couple other resources we want you to know of related to professional ethical conduct that are either required or can assist you. First is the community of care compliance training module. You're required to complete those early in your time as graduate students. And so if you are not in your first year, you've likely already done that. But if you are new, I'll share. This is accessible by searching community of care in UTEP's website or just utep.edu/community of care. As graduate students, you have one module to complete with a post-test you can do on that is optional, and that is on sexual assault awareness and training. Very important. If you don't complete the compliance training, you get a hold on your account because it is required by federal, state, and UT system law. So ethically, you need to do it and not try to find a way around it. There's also Title IX. Title IX is a complex law that governs a lot of different things at institutions, everything from athletics participation through how we respond to sexual assault. We have coordinators on our campus that provide training and review cases for the institution. And there are several coordinators as well as an office. What I will tell you about Title IX is, as graduate student employees interacting with other students, you are considered mandatory reporters. And so if someone violates a Title IX statute, or you're informed of a Title IX related situation, you're obligated to report that. Failure to do so will result in termination, right? I encourage you to check out the Title IX website and also look on Campus Edge and attend a Title IX related session. Again, Title IX situations that may come up can be some of the murkiest situations to determine, is it Title IX? Does it need to be reported? Majority of my career worked in student housing, where because you're working in these close environments with student living situations, in their academic settings, a lot of Title IX situations tend to pop up. And it's really not always clear, does this qualify as a Title IX situation or does it not? And so getting good training on identifying that is important. And at the end of the day, what I always tell students is, when in doubt, report and follow the appropriate reporting guidelines, right? Telling your supervisor is not necessarily reporting. There's also the Center for Accommodation and Support Services, CASS. It is important to know whether you need an accommodation or if you have a student in your class sessions or in your labs that request a kind of accommodation. Again, to make sure you're handling that equitably and ethically, you may need to consult with CASS and see what the student has approved. It is their responsibility to approve accommodations, not necessarily the individual who's teaching the class, right? And so make sure you know that office and you can refer to them. There's also the Campus Advocacy and Resource Education Office, or CARE. They do a huge amount of heavy lifting for us as an institution, functioning in a lot of capacities, but in general, they respond and assist any student who's been a victim of a crime. It's kind of their mandate, right? They work in a lot of Title IX related environments, domestic violence related situations, but they do more than that. And so they're also a good resource to know and also keep a comprehensive list of supportive resources for our campus on their website. And so I encourage you to also learn more about CARE. So again, you may be in a situation where you may need to refer one of your students to CARE, or you may need CARE services yourself. We have a whole other session about campus resources where I talk a whole bunch more. Feel good about all this? You feel ethical, righteous? Excellent. Well, let's get to the point where we can actually, the rubber is going to meet the road. And so we're going to talk about an ethical dilemma. Before you get to read it, I'm going to split you into groups. So what we'll do for this one is I'm going to split you. We have our two pairs here, and then we have our folks online. You'll be participating as a group, conversating with Ray. I'm going to give you this dilemma that I'm going to read through, and then I'll give us about 5 minutes because there's a couple things, the questions to discover and kind of go through. So I'll give you enough time to really work through it, right? But this is an ethical dilemma that I want you to consider how you'd respond. Okay? So the ethical dilemma reads, paying for graduate education can be challenging. To help offset the cost, you've been hoping to get a position with your program as a GA, TA, or RA. Unfortunately, your department is not hiring this semester. However, they did provide several recommendations for programs that have traditionally hired students from your program. After checking into it, you find there is a TA position with program X that sounds interesting, and RA position with program Y that has some crossover with your intended research. Looking over the position descriptions, you find yourself more interested in the RA position with program Y. You decide to apply for both positions, as there is no guarantee you will get the position you prefer. You're excited when both programs reach out and schedule you for an interview. Both meetings go well, and you like the potential supervisors you could end up working for. To your delight, program X moves very quickly through the process and offers you a position as a TA. Hooray! You happily accept the verbal offer and are told you will have a contract that can be signed in approximately 2 weeks once all steps are completed with human resources. 1 week later, you receive a call from program Y about the RA position. They apologize for the delay and ask if you'd be interested in a second interview. Do you have two options and you're on the phone. You don't have time. You got to make a decision. You're running through it very quickly. Do you decline the second round interview for the position knowing you've already made a commitment to the department working on your appointment? Or do you B, accept the second round interview for the other position that better fits your interest area for research, knowing that if offered the position in Department X, the other position will have a hard time being filled by the start of the year? So A or B, think about that, and you're gonna have a conversation with your peers about what you would do. I also want you to think about and answer the questions after you decide what you're gonna do. Which is the most ethical thing to do? Does that conflict with your personal values? And what conflicts might stop you from making an ethically justifiable choice in this situation? So my folks that are paired off, go ahead and take 5 minutes discussing through this. Our folks online, go ahead and have a group convo with this. We'll go ahead and mute so you have the room to yourself. In 5 minutes, I'll bring us back and we'll share back how we felt about this situation. Being transparent also with the folks offering you a second interview, letting them know you've had a verbal offer for a TA position, but that you're interested in the RA position. And then again, maybe you're going on with the interview depending on their decision, but you're also leaving that door open for the future because you may not be that TA forever. That may be a semester or a year. That's a good idea. I think there's a lot of good ideas that have come through of how we can reconcile this and make it the most ethical choice that also is benefiting us in the most tangible way, right? And the transparency piece, I think, was very important. Disclosing to the folks that are offering you an interview that you have a verbal offer that you're navigating right now. And disclosing to the folks that are processing your offer that you're interested in taking this second interview, right? My recommendation from an ethical standpoint would be to try to put off the decision on the interview until you check with your verbal offer to see how they'll react. I wrote out this dilemma and use this because I actually have an example of this. It's more from a professional world, not necessarily RAPA world, where as a part of a search process I was on, an individual went through our process, had done a campus interview, and was offered a coordinator position, is verbally accepted. And then our associate director, who was running and chairing the search process, found out, because it's a very small field, from a friend, that the person then had accepted a campus interview after accepting the verbal offer to go interview somewhere else. In a move that I do not feel was ethical by my associate director, they pulled the person's offer and contacted and told the other person and got the other offer pulled. The person got no job. Yeah. So the transparency piece here can be huge because some departments may be totally okay with that. They want you to get what's best for you. They're like, yeah, we're still working through the process. If you want to take a second interview, we understand. However, the department may not feel that way. And if they find out that you've taken an interview and you've already said you'll work for them, that could seriously damage your reputation. And so you have to consider that and weigh the personal benefit to the potential damage to your reputation in that moment, right? And it's going to be tough because you're going to be on the phone and have about 5 to 10 seconds to run through that whole ethical scheme in your mind as you're stammering of, do I take the interview? You know, make a snap decision, right? Frequently, ethical conversations are going to be snap decisions. And so, some thought exercises on ethical decision making will strengthen your ability to do that in the future. But again, always think about that gut check. Is it legal? Is it permissible? Is it equitable? How will I feel about it if people know that I made this decision? Run through those things in your mind and then make the best decision that you can. Trending towards honesty, transparency, and something that is justifiable and a win-win for everybody. Sound good? Awesome. That is our ethics portion of the presentation. I'm going to go ahead